Persona 3 Reload told the story of the original game from start to finish. Following it up, originally known as The Answer, we have Episode Aigis, as part of the rather costly $35 expansion pass. So does this final piece of the pie make the whole thing worth it?
Hey, keep it moving. The rest of us need to get through too.
Taking place after the events of the main game, this DLC has you playing as Aigis. She takes on the role of the new main character in this somewhat lengthy DLC expansion. It is, in fact, a full epilogue to the main game of Persona 3, so I wouldn't recommend playing this until you've finished Persona 3. Over many years, this part of the story has had a decent amount of internet controversy, I suppose. The somewhat popular opinion for a while was that people didn't like it. I'll admit that I saw a video that has gone around about why a specific person didn't like it, but the video didn't really stick with me because I had no attachment to the game because I watched the movies, and I didn't play The Answer at the time. Anyways, this DLC expansion is pretty up to par with the quality of the base game. I know that everyone has their goods and bads about the remake, but my opinion is that this remake was perfectly fine. If you didn't like it, that's okay, and if you did, good for you. I can understand the discontent that exists for this remake, but I do not necessarily agree with every single point everyone else makes. Episode Aigis takes a page out of Reload's book. A high quantity of voice acting and some new content has been added to the game. There are new social events you can access by obtaining certain key items. These are unfortunately not voiced, which does show a difference in consistency from the main game, but it's really not the end of the world. In some ways, you can argue that it feels like a slight decline in quality from the main game, just due to the fact that those aren't voiced. Again, this isn't a huge deal for me. It would have been nice, but we gotta take what we can get. The part that becomes a bit more irritating is the structure of the gameplay.
At this rate, it will last forever.
Here's the thing, I'm not upset by this. I said irritating before, not upset. It's two different things. In a much less busy month, I'd probably revel in the amount of time I could spend playing this game, and I very likely will revisit it in the future to revise my thoughts, either publicly or personally. But if you're coming into this DLC hoping to get a meaty chunk of story, it's there, and it's good, but the amount of time you spend in the story and doing social stuff is very heavily outweighed by the gameplay portions, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. What I mean to say is that a majority of the DLC is Tartarus. You scale floors for a long while to reach the story, and, at least comparatively to the base game, it's no cakewalk. Persona 3 Reload's main game is incredibly unbalanced in terms of difficulty. It favors the player a lot more. A near surefire way to beat the main game is to just slam a persona with physical and get Scarlet Havoc. You're pretty much set at that point. I'm sure to an extent that the same strategy can exist in Episode Aigis, however I personally found that even on normal, a lot of enemies have bigger health pools, higher endurance, and dish out pretty decent damage. You could argue that I definitely didn't put as much time into crafting my ultimate personas and whatnot, but even the DLC personas were nerfed so that they no longer have their 75% boost skills. I applaud the attempt to at least somewhat balance the game, though I'm sure with a little more time spent in the Velvet Room, I probably could have blasted enemies the same way I do in the regular game. That said, I never felt challenged by Reload at all, so having the difficulty feel a bit more balanced is a somewhat nice experience. As I've said before, I'm not a huge person for difficult games. I will say though, despite this, having enemies with no weaknesses and that are also immune to physical can make battles feel like a slog. Definitely could have made things easier for myself though. But ultimately, this is the bulk of the DLC. You grind Tartarus for most of it, and the story is split into small little segments. There's a mild amount of social events, but this is a finisher to a great game. It's not the entire game again, so you're not going to have social links and whatnot. In my personal opinion, I think the dungeon crawling could serve to be a bit shorter, but I'm also trying to keep in mind that since my schedule is rather tight, I have opinions that would have preferred this to be a shorter experience for what I was given. Regardless, it can feel like the amount of time you spend fighting as opposed to story is done to justify the price of the pass. And I don't really like spreading rhetoric like that, so I'm not really going to elaborate on that too much. I still feel like we're getting a relatively high quality experience with this DLC.
This better not come back to bite us in the ass.
You also are now playing as everyone's favorite toaster, Aigis. She Naruto runs her way through the floors, and instead of attacking enemies with a sword, she shoots them. This means you have access to ranged ambushes, but she's a bit more awkward to use since running changes her attack animations. It's a little bit of something to get used to. She now also gains the ability to break objects by running for long enough without stopping, and honestly, traversal went pretty smoothly for me, since having auto-targeting and AoE makes getting ambushes way easier. Though stopping your running for auto-targeting may take some getting used to, I think I liked playing Aigis a bit more than the MC in the dungeon. What winds up being an issue is that since we aren't on a calendar system, you can leave and re-heal as you please. Generally, it doesn't take away that much, but it also doesn't feel that necessary to stay in Tartarus for the Arcana Burst, because you're not looking for higher level cards to heal yourself or gain more XP since you can kind of just leave and come back and do the same thing. The game tries to encourage you to stay for Monad doors, but generally there's a teleporter nearby or on the same floor, so after you do one, you can return and heal. The Monad doors also come with a custom difficulty. You can choose whether you want to fight the easier door or the harder ones. Generally, what this means is you'll either fight multiple waves of enemies or just one. It's a fun addition, and getting rewarded for your efforts does feel pretty good. It also just doesn't feel like there's a good reason to ever pick the easier ones unless you really have no health or SP left, and you still want some form of reward anyway. Other than that, it's business as usual.
Top quality!
I don't know who's here for my gripping critique of the narrative of Episode Aigis, but to avoid spoiling anyone, it's good. That's really all I have to say in this instance. It doesn't hit the same highs as the main plotline, but it is a shorter DLC experience, which is meant to serve as an epilogue, which is typically not a 100-hour experience after an 100-hour game. In other words, it really doesn't need to hit those highs as much. Admittedly, I'm trying to avoid saying anything that would spoil the plot, so we'll be moving on from this topic.
The answer.
The answer?
That answer.
This answer.
The answer.
Honestly, I think Episode Aigis is another high-quality experience from Atlus. There's a lot of care that got put into it, but ultimately, I still think $35 is a steep asking price for what we got. While it can stretch to a 30-hour experience, I tend to not value a game based on the hours I put into it versus the amount of entertainment and value I feel like I got out of it. If you do all of Elizabeth's requests and get all the weapons and whatnot, it probably stretches to a longer experience. It still is a lot of combat and not very much story, which is kind of what I play Persona for. The extras like the BGM randomizer and outfits are fine, but I feel like the BGM randomizer is not really additive to the price. Ultimately, while I did enjoy my time with this, unless you are absolutely craving more Persona 3 Reload, I just wouldn't recommend picking this up unless it's on sale. It's not bad again, it's just expensive. And if you have any thoughts regarding Episode Aigis, Persona 3 Reload, and the expansion pass, let me know in the comments down below. You can leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe to the channel for more things Persona, Atlus, and JRPG related. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.